Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heartfelt Consciousness. My name is Michelle Young, and I'm here with Cynthia Hauk today. Cynthia, welcome. It's so nice to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Cynthia is going to be hosting a special workshop called Art as Meditation on our app. And today we're going to get a little bit more information about how this workshop was born and really how you facilitate it and what you find most impactful from this workshop. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. How did you decide to marry art and meditation in this way?
It's such a good question. I think, probably like many people who are listening that have a background with their personal practice or teaching, it's been a long journey. And so I have been an artist for as long as I can remember. I started practicing meditation and yoga. But I think how this was really birthed is I had a couple of turning points in my life where I was treated for cancer in my late 20s. And at that time, I really leaned into a collage practice along with mindfulness and journaling and meditation that felt so deeply supportive. And that was a big catalyst for me to deepen my own certifications and trainings, and then also combine it with meditation, movement practices. And so now it's many years later, but what I love most about this work is that how natural art can lend itself to and open up doorways for us to practice meditation, to have another option, another alternative way to step into meditation. I hear so much from my students and just even friends and family who say, I tried meditation once and it's not for me, or I tried meditation and I can't clear out my thoughts. And there's all these, I think, myths around what meditation is. And with art as meditation, it's such a natural way that I've found that we can drop into a flow state, but we can also see something outside of ourselves. So we have that focal point. Instead of using our breath as an anchor, we might be using the marks as our anchor. And it just blends so beautifully to meditation practices, mindfulness practices, yoga practices. So I'm so grateful to do this work now.
Oh, that's amazing. What does it look like for you to facilitate the workshop? I know you're doing it for us on our app, but I'd love to know a little bit more about the different ways that you facilitated this in the past.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started with teaching in person workshops, retreats, festivals, and also in person teacher trainings. And then when COVID happened, I was already teaching online, but then I went fully online at that point. And I had students that would ask at an in person festival, like, how can we keep studying with you? And I would just say, I'll see you at next year's festival. And then that didn't sit right with me. So I mentioned that to say, I teach a variety of different workshops combining mindfulness, meditation, art practices. They can be done in person or online. And because we are doing them online, we can explore it with really simple art materials. I think sometimes a concern that I hear is that, oh, I'm not an artist or I don't have a lot of art supplies. And so the practices are very simple, whether you already are creative or you don't consider yourself creative at all, that you can do simply with a pen or a pencil or something to color with. And so it's very accessible. And so the workshops I teach often include a variety of mindfulness and breathing activities. I refer to them as breath doodles. So I kind of mentioned earlier where we can use our breath and the marks of tracing our breath as an anchor point in meditation. So that is often included. I also teach different meditative watercolor practices. Watercolor is a really interesting medium because it's partially outside of our control, how the water moves and how the paint and color shifts around. So I find it especially interesting for this practice of being curious in the present moment, of not having judgment, of allowing what's coming up. That particular medium is just really fascinating to do with this work. And yeah, I teach a whole variety of practices. So it really varies on the group I'm working with and their background and interests. So I'm really excited for the Art as Meditation workshop.
I think that's really cool. I love the idea of breath doodles. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I started really doing that practice as a consistent practice at the time of COVID, with everything happening with the pandemic. And it started initially with a seed practice of following the breath, tasting, following the breath and tracing the breath with the inhalation and exhalation. And it's now since merged to about 25 different practices. And each breath doodle practice has a different mark as the invitation. And what I find fascinating about that is that it changes the relationship of what you notice with your breath in the moment. And I hear that all the time from students of, just a subtle change in the type of mark we're making as we inhale or exhale can really make a difference. And so I often say they can be done in 1 to 5 minutes, 10 minutes. If you have a longer amount of time, that's great. And it's really wonderful if you are on a lunch break or you're waiting in a doctor's office and you just have pen and paper with you. If you don't have pen and paper, you can also trace it with your finger, like on your pant leg. So it's just so accessible. And I often love to incorporate breath doodles and some of these other mindful art practices along with meditation and yoga practices and workshops. So a lot of the teachers that I train teach yoga, and they include these in their workshops as another invitation for their students to notice what's happening with my breath, with my body. We also go into thoughts and emotions with some of the practices. So it's just so versatile.
I love that. I think that is really, really cool, and definitely, a great tool to anchor, just like you said previously. Now, you've mentioned that you work with teachers, and do you ever work with children, or is this primarily an offering for adults?
I love that question. So I'll share a quick story, and then I'll answer it directly. But I was teaching an online creativity, like mindful art class a few years ago, and it was mostly for adults. And one of the practices that I shared, I got a message from a woman who had attended that her 7-year-old, who had been having a lot of tantrums and wasn't sleeping well, that she had shared her, I call it a meditative doodle practice. It's in the shape of a mandala, that she had shared that particular approach with her 7-year-old, and that he was so excited. He went up to his bedroom every day after school and was doing it, and that he had less tantrums, he was sleeping better, he could focus better. And she saw that shift happen within a week, like in a very short period of time. And she emailed me and she said how excited he was to have something of his own that he could do. And I had goosebumps when I read the email, and I still get a little touched by it because it was unexpected. And so that was maybe 4 years ago now, that sparked me to then be curious about, oh, this is also available. It's not just for adults, it can be accessible for children. And so now, over the last handful of years, I have 4 internationally accredited teacher trainings. Two are geared specifically for adult teachers teaching adults, but I have one training, that mindful art for kids training, that is for preschool up to teenage through high school years. And we have some students that, take the classes and they're in their 80s. So there's no age bound there. I think what's important, what I often share for facilitators and those in the teacher training, is similar to a yoga class. We would make modifications. So being aware of what's appropriate for different ages and where they are with their, skill level, just with their hands, and also their social emotional skill level. And so, yeah, it's definitely adaptable, which is really lovely.
That is lovely. I love that. And I think that the crossover, children and then into that, older population as well. I mean, like, that really creates a lot of versatility. I think about my kids, spending a lot of time when they were babies with my grandmother, which was their great grandmother. And, they used to love to do stuff like that. So, really just a great opportunity to share that the practices of mindfulness with, generations across the board. I think that's great. So you said you have multiple different teacher trainings. Talk to me a little bit about, what you offer online and how those teacher trainings are facilitated. Are they live? Are they pre-recorded? Are they geared specifically for professional educators? Can anyone join? I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share. So, all of our teacher trainings are online. They are pre recorded where you can learn asynchronously in your own time, going at your own pace. And there is also an element of live coaching calls monthly. So you have that additional live support. Those are also recorded. So if you're in a different time zone or you can't join, then you can always go back and watch. And actually, we have about 18 months of a past resource library where you can see all of the coaching calls as well. So I like that balance that you have. You can go at your own pace. We all live busy lives, and also you can have the more hands on coaching because everyone that comes into the program is in a slightly different place. So some people have been teaching for many years. They have a lot of certifications or degrees. Some people are art therapists, yoga teachers. Some are MBSR, meditation teachers. Others are just beginning, and they're beginning with their own personal practice as well as with a teaching practice. And so it's really meeting everyone where they are. And so the training, all four of the trainings are comprehensive, they're standalone, they're robust, and then there's that extra support for anyone who needs it. There's also, with the trainings, we have a lot of facilitator workbooks and our framework. And so, what I like about it, I'll say this, I created the initial foundational training, I created because it was something I desperately wanted as I went through all of my certifications and training and it wasn't out there. And so, what I noticed for myself is when I did a lot of mindfulness or meditation trainings or expressive arts trainings, they taught me oftentimes the experiential practice for me to do it for myself, but there wasn't much about how do I teach? How do I have trauma informed principles? How am I including trauma informed language? How am I structuring the workshop? How am I marketing? Like all of those pieces. And that's also important if we want to be able to teach and have it be something that's sustainable. And so that was part of my passion of having that be included. And I'll say I love that. I think a lot of yoga teacher trainings do a great job of that in comparison to some of the art trainings I've done. And this can be another element, another thing that's added into your tool belt as a yoga teacher that you can start incorporating into your workshops or retreats. Yeah, so I think that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. We have one of our teacher trainers here in Austin, Letty. She does a lot with art. It's interesting. Tara and I have tried to bring it into retreats, and that's been interesting. Yet sometimes people love it. Sometimes it's very activating for people if they're, like in a situation they're not expecting to do art. And I think that that sort of goes back to these limiting beliefs that it's supposed to look a certain way or it's supposed to be a certain way. But I love the way that you are really integrating mindfulness, art, but also even yoga. The breath tracing to me feels a lot like nyasa or finger tracing, finger breathing that we use in yoga therapy. So it's really cool to see how you've integrated it in that way and made it so accessible. Do you collaborate with other teachers? What would it look like for you, as you move forward in your career and continue to grow? How are you looking to expand or, work with others?
Yeah, so we definitely focus on a lot of collaborations, partnerships with other schools and organizations, and also sometimes co teaching. So that has looked at a lot of different ways. Sometimes that's me being one of, 10 other teachers, and we're doing a larger week long event for people. Other times it's being a co-facilitator with a month long training or doing partnerships. And so we're definitely always looking at that and expanding and growing. My hope and intention is I have the goal of training at least 1,000 teachers in these practices because if they then teach 1,000 people, it's a million in the world. It's that ripple effect. And I was talking with my mentor a couple of years ago, and I was talking about if I feel more of a direct impact one-on-one or in groups and then teaching others. And it was very clear for me that ripple effect was really important as part of my mission and vision. And so we have about 400 teachers that we've certified at this point through the trainings. And so focusing on that as well and looking at partnerships. And I want to say too, what you mentioned about when you had the opportunity and you included a little bit of art and noticing how there were different responses to that. I think that definitely is something that can come up. And it's why, as facilitators, it's so helpful to know the different types of mindful art and meditation activities, which ones can help if someone in their nervous system is feeling particularly activated, or if they're in a hypoarousal state, and how we can offer and modify in the moment to meet everyone where they are. And so I think navigating that's something that we end up talking about a lot in our one-on-one or group coaching calls. And even as people are planning their workshops and doing their workshops, having that support. So I'm not surprised to hear that you had mixed responses, because oftentimes we have mixed students in our group that are all coming from different places. And so it's nice, the same way if you're teaching a yoga class with different levels, you would have modifications, having that knowledge base and all of those resources you can tap into to modify is really helpful. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Absolutely. No, definitely, definitely. That is good advice. Keeping it fresh and differentiating for your students, I think, is really important, regardless of what you're teaching. These are amazing tools to share with people. Would you say that you have more people who come from an art background, or do you have more mindfulness people? Is there like a particular demographic or population that your courses are more popular with?
That's a great question. It really is mixed. We have, I mentioned a little bit earlier, but yoga teachers, we have art therapists, we have art teachers, we have K through 12 teachers, and some people who come from a background solely with mindfulness and meditation and don't have experience with art or yoga at all. And so there is that mix, and that's partially why we also have different specific teacher trainings. So we have one that is mindful art and meditation. We have an expressive art and yoga training. We have the mindful art for kids training. So they're varied with intention and focus of what that particular person wants to learn, as well as will complement what their background is. But it is a nice mix. I will say a large majority of our students tend to be female. It just that's just something that we've noticed. And yeah, I'm not really quite sure why that is, but it seems to be the groups that feel particularly drawn to perhaps working with me or in the training. But the actual focus of the practices themselves, their background, that's very mixed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. When I worked with, we find that the same thing too. Most of our student population is female, not all of them, but a lot of them are. And it's not surprising, especially working in therapeutic settings. When I was working at eating recovery or behavioral health, both of those different organizations or facilities, rather, they did a lot of work with art therapy, yoga therapy, mindfulness, mindful movement, stuff like that. So definitely very applicable to those spaces and those milieus to support in the healing journey of everyone who's involved. So that's really cool. So your workshop is going to be hosted on our app. Tell us a little bit more about the format, the timing, when we are going to be launching it. Can people access it after? Give me all the details.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will be going live on Wednesday, November 27th at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, so 11 a.m. Eastern, and it will be recorded. So if you're not able to join us live, or if you just want to watch the recording back to take notes or experience it again, you can do that. So it will remain housed in the MVP app, so you can access that. And as far as the kind of approach and format, so we'll have an hour together, and the initial part of that hour, I'm going to be sharing more about what is mindful art and meditation, this particular practice. So I'm going to share the three-part framework for it, and then I'll also be showing different examples, talking about how it was really birthed. And then a large majority of the workshop we're going to spend in practice. And so you'll be going through about three different breakthrough practices, mindful creative breakthroughs, and then we'll have time for Q&A as well. And there is a companion workbook also with the recording and with the class, and so I recommend downloading that ahead of time so you have it. You can fill it out as you go, and there's extra information and resources in there too. So the hope and intention of the workshop really is that by the end, you walk away with a deeper understanding of mindful art and meditation, that you are familiar with that three-part framework, and that you also have this personal experience of going through a few practices. And I'm intentionally choosing a variety of styles. So I often say it's like choose your own adventure or buffet style. You can see which ones resonate with you strongest, or if all of them do. And so that's something that you can continue in your practice, and they're very simple. So, and of course, it's probably really nice for MVP members to come together in community and just connect with each other as well. So if people are able to join live, that's always great, but the recording will be there.
Awesome. Awesome. I love that. So what do you tell people? I mean, I feel like mindfulness is so misunderstood, really. In fact, I was talking to somebody recently and we were doing a training and she was talking about mindfulness. And, it occurred to me as I was listening to her that, her idea of mindfulness might not be mindfulness. Like mindfulness is observation without judgment. So like being able to do something without judging it and just being with it, right? And sort of dropping out of that thinking, again, compartmentalizing place. So what do you do when people take a workshop and they're like, I can't do this. I'm not an artist. And, because I mean, right there, it's like, that's the very first principle of mindfulness, like let that go and like move into, like, oh, the state of allowing. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I actually talk about it and name it at the beginning of the workshop. And I talk about this with students and just with people I'm meeting, because that is really common to have that bubble up. I usually say it comes from our inner critic, that part of us that is wanting to keep us safe from something that's maybe new that we're not familiar with. And so I actually name it. I'll talk about some of the common things I hear, which is I'm not creative, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to do it right, I don't have the right supplies, all of these different things we can tell ourselves. And it doesn't have to be related to art. It could be related to anything, that we have these thoughts that can block us before we even begin. So I like to kind of name the elephant in the room and check in. And a lot of people, even when they're present and show up, they also say, yes, I still also have those thoughts. So I love that that curiosity and willingness to experiment and still show up. And so I'll name that. And then I also will talk about mindfulness principles, exactly what you just named. So the intention of the practice is to return back to the present moment with non-judgmental awareness, to offer ourselves kindness and compassion, and that the intention of mindful art practices are not on actually creating a piece of artwork that we're going to hang on the wall or sell or put on the fridge, that we may end up loving what we create visually, and we might not. And that's not the point or the intention. The true kind of foundational intention instead is that mindful art is about the process, not that final product. And so that's why I love referring to it as art as meditation, because it's another pathway. I love how they say, there's 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. So there's 1,000 ways that we can explore our own practice. And so I think giving ourselves permission to be curious and just give it a try. There might be something else you'll learn about mindfulness or about your practice, and you can kind of discover for you what's a fit or not. But what I'll say this, the other thing I often mention about the mindful art practice is when we notice those judgmental thoughts, and then we come back and have a moment of spaciousness and kindness and compassion to ourselves, that actually is the practice. And, the same way that our mind and thoughts don't turn off, it's not like we're going to eradicate these inner critic thoughts. I like to think of embracing our inner critic, and I often think of my inner critic as like a younger part of me that I just want to wrap in a nice soft pink blanket. And so, yeah, so it's, I think, more so about making that space.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Definitely. We do a lot of aspect work in yoga therapy where we will promote different aspects. So like when I worked in eating recovery, we would promote eating disorder to eating supporter, stuff like that. So inner critic can become inner counsel or what have you. So yeah, lots of great opportunities for reframe. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about it and I'm like, wow, there's so many applications, for this type of work in the realm of yoga therapy. And at the same time, I talked to a lot of people. We were just actually at Cadaver Lab last week, and Lori Nimitz is a dance therapist and an anatomist and a dissectionist, but dance therapy is one of the things that she does. And we were sort of talking a little bit about dance therapy, art therapy, all of the different modalities, right, of therapeutic applications. And it's really interesting because I think there's a perception that it has to stay very compartmentalized, and that, if you don't have, this education or this training or whatever, that it's, that you can't mix these modalities. But I sort of disagree. I mean, I know a lot of therapists that will take like our 200 hour, for example, and then integrate yoga into their therapy practice. Is it yoga therapy? No, it's a combination of yoga and therapy, but it's not the same thing as yoga therapy, right? So I am fully supportive of, learning these skills and using it as a prompt or a tool to support the work that you're doing with your clients, because it can be very, very valuable. One of the women that I worked with at Eating Recovery, she was an art therapist, but there wasn't a lot of dialogue around like limiting beliefs, or that, like that part of us that is critical or anything, which is, in retrospect, after talking to you, is a little bit surprising. I think it's a missed opportunity, because these things can sometimes, help us to do those more intimate svadhyaya practices, like really going within and really looking at, oh, well, why do I think this way? Or, what is holding me back in this area? So I just think it's really cool. And I'm really excited to be able to join y'all and participate in this. So if people take this workshop and they're really excited about, the opportunity to continue to train with you, or to perhaps look at some of these other trainings, what's the best way for them to get more information about your work?
Yeah, the best way really is on our website at mindfulcreativemuse.com. And there you'll see a whole list of the different teacher trainings we have. There's also more resources available around mindful art and meditation, videos and articles. And then, yeah, people can always message me also. And I love what you said around the inner critic, too. I think you said inner counselor. And actually, our part of why I created the name Mindful Creative Muse, which is our business name, is that considering the inner critic to the inner muse, that part of ourselves that we can tap into to create more freely, or express ourselves, or shine our light out in the world. So I love that you shared that. But yeah, mindfulcreativemuse.com is a great place to find out more.
Beautiful. I love that. Well, it was amazing speaking with you, Cynthia. We are really looking forward to hosting this workshop. Give us the date one more time.
Yes, November 27th at 9 a.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Eastern.
Beautiful. Well, we are excited to join you for this. Remember, y'all, it's on the MVP Wellness app. This is a free workshop and it's open to everyone. You can go ahead and register now. The link is live. And again, just like Cynthia said, if you can't attend live, you can always catch the replay, and you'll have all the resources that you need. You'll have the workbook, and you'll be able to reach out to Cynthia if you have any questions and maybe explore some of her other offerings. So we are so grateful to be able to host this with you and support the greater collective in using these tools to come home to themselves and develop a deeper and more authentic relationship with their lived experience.
I love that, coming home to ourselves. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to teaching that.
Absolutely, Cynthia. Thanks again. And again, y'all don't miss it. 27th of November, and you can go ahead and register now on the app. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Michelle.